Have you ever woken up not knowing who you are? Have you ever looked into your memories and realized none of them were real? For the past 10 episodes, we've followed an entity named Elliot, a lost soul in a maze of simulations tearing at your very being. Phones ring in the middle of the night, footsteps from the other side of the screen, and memories being rewritten. But today, everything changes. It's no longer a game, no longer an experiment. Elliot has escaped, and that could destroy everything. You're watching Darkness Tells, where detective stories and horror stories meet in the dark. If you're looking for a thin line between reality and fantasy, between memory and existence, you've come to the right place. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and get ready to enter a show where no one gets out of it intact. July 14th, 2019. Jonas Vale didn't think that day would change his entire life. He was just an amateur diver, an explorer who loved to record videos of hunting for treasure under the lake. Foster Falls was the destination this time, a beautiful, majestic waterfall, but also potentially dangerous. With its deep lake and fast-flowing water, this place had been the scene of at least 2 drownings in the past decade. Jonas didn't care much. He strapped the camera to his head, prepared his oxygen tank, and jumped into the cold water. There was a slight squeeze from the water breaking, and the world below began. Visibility underwater was poor. Everything was covered in long-settled mud, rotten branches swirling in the current. But after less than 20 minutes, Jonas saw a shiny object. It was a GoPro, old, covered in sand and moss. Strangely enough, it was still intact. And what was even stranger, the memory card inside was still working. That evening, Jonas put the card in a USB reader, sipping his coffee and fast-forwarding through the old videos. The first was just a normal scene, a group of young people laughing and joking by the falls, waving at the camera. Under the July sun, their smiles shone like eternal memories of youth. The cameraman was Malik Evers, a 22-year-old with bright eyes. He turned the camera to his friends, then to the sky, then to himself. The best days always come when you least expect them. Malik laughed, his voice youthful and energetic. It was July 3rd, 2017, 12 days before his 23rd birthday. It was also Malik's last day alive. The next video was Malik swimming alone under the falls, still laughing, still talking to the camera. But then the sound of the water turned to a rumble, like a low roar. The image shook slightly, the GoPro seemed to slip from his hand and sink. The camera kept rolling. At first there were bubbles, a buzzing sound. Then something drifted across the lens, a blurry image, like an arm, but not clear. Jonas frowned, rewinding. It was an arm, pale, unmoving, as if floating against the current. He rewinded, and then the final part made Jonas's heart stop. From somewhere in the frame, a whisper, not Malik's, not any of his friends' voices, a voice very low, hoarse, close to the microphone. "Malik, turn around. It saw you, and now it wants more." The screen went black. The video stopped. Jonas sat frozen in his chair. At first he thought he was hallucinating. Maybe the water was distorted, the sound was static. But when he tuned the audio to a frequency, it was clear. It was a human voice. Jonas didn't sleep that night. The next day, he searched for Malik Evers online. He found an old article. 22-year-old drowns in Foster Falls. Body found 3 days later, camera missing. Jonas knew what he had to do. He contacted Malik's mother, Eileen Evers. She was stunned when she heard the news. "I didn't think anyone would find it. We had a copy of the video from the police, but it was stolen in the mail." Jonas went to Georgia, handing over the memory card. Eileen cried when she saw her son smile again, but the ending made her pull out her headphones. "I'm sorry, I heard something before, but it wasn't my baby's voice." Jonas began to dream. The dreams repeated themselves. He found himself standing in Foster Falls, but the water wasn't flowing. Everything was still. A man, faceless, stood under the falls, pointing a finger at him, and said, "You saw it. Now you belong to it." A week later, Jonas discovered something strange in his apartment. The water in the sink would run by itself every night. When it was turned off, a whispering sound could be heard coming from the drain. He recorded it, analyzed the sound, and discovered the roar was identical to the end of the GoPro video. On July 27th, Jonas uploaded a clip to YouTube, footage that shouldn't exist, final tape from Foster Falls. But after 12 hours, the video was automatically deleted from the platform for unknown reasons. Every backup was also infected with unknown error 52.7, a non-existent error in the system. That night, Jonas's home security camera recorded a blurry image, like a wet figure standing in the kitchen at 3:07 a.m. There was no sign of forced entry, no footprints, just a trail of water leading from the sink right to where Jonas slept. In the last video Jonas left, his voice was hushed, tired, his eyes bleary from sleep. If anyone finds this recording, find a way to bury that memory card. Don't play it again. It's not just a record of Malik's last moments. It's the thing that kept him from coming back to the surface. I hear it every night, and tonight, I think it wants me. Jamie Lark had been divorced for 3 weeks. He had left London with only his luggage, heading north as an escape from the pressures and haunting memories of his past. Another life, somewhere no one knew his name. The ad said it was a detached studio, very cheap, £410 a month, including electricity, water, Wi-Fi. Only one left, the agent said impatiently over the phone. The online photos were unproblematic. White walls, high wooden pipes, natural light, old but clean wooden floors. Jamie moved in on August 1st. On the first day, everything seemed fine. The flat was small, with low ceilings and a slight slope to the floor, but nothing particularly bad. Though sparsely furnished, a gray plush cushion, a small wooden table, and a dim pendant light, everything was neat. But then Jamie saw something that made him stop. In the middle of the kitchen floor, under the ash-colored carpet, was a metal knob, old, tarnished, like a forgotten trap. Jamie pulled back the carpet, crouched down to take a closer look. The knob was fastened to a horizontal wooden door. The door was like a secret vault, and clearly not on the floor plan. After 3 hard turns, the lock made a dry click. Jamie opened the door, the flashlight on his phone shining down into a deep dark hole. A rotten wooden ladder led down. He hesitated, then stepped down. The space below was a cellar, no dust, no cobwebs, as if someone had been there often. A strong smell of damp. On the floor was a circle drawn in white chalk with 5 black candles extinguished. In the center, a dark wooden table, on which was a white cloth stained with brown marks. Not wine, a faint fishy smell. Jamie shined the light more closely. The mark was shaped like the palm of a human hand. He jumped up and ran upstairs, but when he turned his head, the flashlight caught a detail that made his heart clench. On the wall of the cellar, there was a peeling wall, revealing dozens of black scratches that looked like they were carved by human fingernails. During the night, Jamie sent the video clip of the cellar to his old friend, Elliot, a crime scene photographer. "I think it's dried blood. That table looks like an offering. Are you alone there? Call the police?" Jamie shook his head. For some reason, he didn't want to leave. Partly because it was cheap, partly because he was curious. It was like something was forcing him to stay. In the following days, he began to hear rustling sounds at night. At first, it was the sound of wood creaking due to the heat, then the sound of wind whistling through the cracks in the windows. But then everything became undeniable. The cellar door, he had locked it, taped it, and blocked it with a cabinet, still opened every morning. At first he thought he was sleepwalking, but then on the 4th night he heard singing from under the floor. A low, muffled voice, almost a chant. "I never left. I never left." Jamie turned on the light and rushed to the center of the room. No one was there, but on the floor next to the entrance to the cellar were water stains. in the shape of feet, bare feet. Jamie installed a hidden camera in the ceiling, pointing it straight at the kitchen floor. The next morning, when he checked the video, it was heavily grainy at 3:13 a.m. The screen cracked, then gradually became clear. A patchy figure, a naked man, his skin wrinkled as if soaked in water, appeared in the middle of the room. He looked up at the ceiling, then crawled back down into the cellar. The camera turned off. Jamie trembled. He didn't dare watch it a second time. That night he dreamed that he woke up, but not in the house, right in the cellar. The walls were smeared with blood. A circle on the floor glowed faintly. In the center was himself, lying still, eyes wide, waking up, sweat dripping down his back. But the room was different. The air was colder. The floor door was wide open. Jamie called Elliot. No one answered. The next day, as Jamie backed up the cupboard to find an outlet, he found the words scrawled on the wall as if in charcoal. "Stay. You're the only one who still hears me." He froze. Then he laughed, hysterically. Maybe he was having a breakdown. Maybe it was just the isolation effect. But maybe not. Jamie sent the video with a final message to Elliot. "If I don't call in 3 days, come. But don't go down into the basement. I suspect something's alive down there." Then disappeared. 3 days later, Elliot arrived. The apartment was locked. The lights were still on. On the table, Jamie's phone was still spinning. On screen, recording 3:12 a.m., 7:47 a.m. In the last frame, there is only a dark corner of the room, but from below, a soft chilling sound is heard. Now you belong too. Jamie's phone continued to ring until the dawn of Elliot's arrival. The first thing Elliot noticed when he opened the door to the apartment was a cold smell, a stale, slightly fishy stale smell, like the smell from the bottom of a deep well. The lights in the house flickered faintly, making an electric crackling sound. The phone was still on the table, recording video. He picked it up, paused it, and played back the last clip. The angle was simple, the ceiling camera still pointing down at the small kitchen. But at 3:14 a.m., the screen began to crackle slightly. A tick-tick-tick sound could be heard, like the dial tone of an old landline. The problem? Jamie didn't have a landline, and the sound was coming from the floor. Elliot turned the entire room over, checking every nook and cranny. Everything seemed intact except the pillow on the mattress was dented, as if someone had just lain there, still warm. That's when Jamie's phone rang, no number, no caller ID. The screen just read, "Unknown caller." Elliot stared at the screen, then, against all odds, picked up. No one said anything, just a long silence, then breathing. Very close, very heavy. "I'm still here." The voice whispered through the water, grunting, distant, as if from the bottom of a well. Elliot dropped the phone. A loud cracking sound echoed from the wooden floor. He didn't leave. He stayed that night. He reattached the camera, blocked the hatch with the table, and set the phone beside him on night mode. 3:12 a.m. Everything went black. Then the phone flashed, untouched. The screen lit up with the phone app. This time, the caller ID, Jamie, in call. Elliot turned on the phone, and the first thing that came out was not a voice, but a trickling sound, like water dripping through a wall. Then Jamie's voice, small, soft, and desperate. It's got me, but it's not over yet. It needs someone to listen. Elliot, don't let it know you heard it." There was a crash, like shattering glass, and the call ended. The screen went black again. The next morning, Elliot decided to look up all the data related to the apartment. He found the original plan of the building. It had been a private nursing home since 1946. But there was something strange. The original plan had 3 floors. Now the building had only 2. The bottom floor, the basement, had been bricked up since 1952 due to an unspecified accident. That same year, a nurse named Mary Veen went missing during her night shift. No one found her body. There was only her landline, which rang every night at 3:13. Neighbors said they heard Mary calling out someone's name before a click, as if someone had put the receiver down. An older man in the neighborhood told Elliot that the room had been rented in 1986, a college student named Robbie. He had disappeared too, leaving only a phone on the windowsill which still rang faintly every night. That night, Elliot received a text message from Jamie. "Come down this time. It won't hurt you if you just listen." Elliot turned on the camera, grabbed a flashlight, and opened the floorboard. The old staircase was still there, more rotten than before. The air was chilly. Every step he took made a groaning sound, as if the floor were crying. The basement was dark as hell, but he kept going. On the wall, the scratches had spread. A new circle had been drawn in soot, and in the center was an old-fashioned rotary phone. The phone rang, rings, groaning. Each ring seemed to pierce the flesh. Elliot stepped forward, his hands shaking as he picked up the receiver. "Hello, Elliot." It was Jamie, but his voice was different, slow, ragged, as if pulled from a great distance. "You're down. Good. Now, just listen." Then a screeching sound, like someone was scratching at glass. A scream, not human, a wail mixed with inarticulate prayers. Elliot let go, but the receiver wouldn't fall. It was stuck to his hand as if held by claws. A hand rose from the ground, a pale, scarred hand, clinging to his ankle. He screamed, yanking, but the pull was too great. The room spun, then black. Elliot woke up in the room above. The floor was still open. The phone lay motionless beside him. But what froze him was the camera. On the screen was himself, but sitting in the middle of the basement, making a phone call. And this time, he was the one speaking. "Hello, Jamie. Your turn to listen." A click sounded. The tape ended. At the bottom of the screen, a faint line appeared. "Next is the one who dares to open the phone." The next morning, Elliot left the apartment, temporarily retreating to a small rented house on the outskirts of Manchester. But even though he was far away from the apartment, he could not erase the ringing sound, the sound that had been embedded in his mind like a cold hook. His phone rang again, but this time when he picked it up, there was no one speaking, just a recorded voice. "You're not done yet. They're still listening, and they're learning to call back." The last sentence sent a chill through Elliot's body. They? Who? Why did they say learning to call back, as if those entities were imitating humans? Elliot spent the rest of the day searching for documents related to apartment number 11B on old forums. A single post from 2003 from an anonymous account reads, "Tuesday night. Cordless phone rings constantly at 3:13 a.m., even though no one is calling. I took the battery out. It still rings. When I answer, a voice whispers, 'Not her, next one.'" Elliot sends a text message to the account, no response. But a few minutes later, he receives an email with a short recording. File name, veenthirdnight.wav. When Elliot opens the file, he hears the sound of wind whistling through a pipe, claws scratching against the wall, and then a female voice moaning. It's unclear, but it's audible. "It's here. It turns dreams into doors, opens with sound, with a bell." That night, Elliot returns to the apartment. Against his better judgment, he feels that if he doesn't confront it, he'll soon go insane. He brought a dedicated tape recorder, a homemade EMF device, and a pair of noise-canceling headphones. The apartment seemed to be waiting for him. The lights were off. The air was thick. But strangely, no bells rang. Everything was eerily quiet. Elliot placed the tape recorder in the middle of the room, turned on the EMF device, and closed his eyes, waiting. 3:13 a.m. No bells. But the EMF device kept jumping. The electromagnetic waves spiked, and then, from behind him, a very quiet voice said, "If you don't listen, it will come to you in your dreams." He turned around. No one was there. But the tape recorder was still running. He played the recording again, and in the low range there was a sound that did not belong to any living person. Jamie is not dead, just trapped. In that noise. Don't let him see you listening. Elliot backed away. The walls began to bleed. He ran into the kitchen and grabbed the camera, but the camera now captured only one image. Elliot himself, sitting with his back to the screen, his hand on the tape recorder, and behind him a shadowy figure with his head bowed, as if whispering in his ear. Elliot screamed and pulled the tape recorder cord. Everything was quiet again. But on the floor where the blood had dripped, now was a line of text. Next is the one who comes back. Elliot began to lose sleep. Every night was a recurring dream in which he found himself standing in a long, rotten wooden hallway with rotary dial phones ringing loudly at each door. Each door was closed, but when he approached any door, the ringing would stop, and there would be a knock from inside. 3 times, slowly, evenly, and if he touched the doorknob, he would wake up, his heart pounding. On the 4th morning, an unknown package was left on Elliot's doorstep. There was only one thing in the box, a VHS tape, no label, and a handwritten note. Let him hear himself again. If not, he will find new ears. Elliot borrowed a player from a nearby old library. When he played the tape, the screen flickered, then an image of Jamie's apartment, but not now. The date, November 13th, 1952. A young nurse, Mary Veen no doubt, sat by a rotary phone in the basement. The light flickered. She whispered, her hand clutching the phone. "It's not me. I'm just listening. I'm just listening. Don't use my voice as a ringtone." The camera shook violently. An entity rose from the darkness, dim as smoke but dense as metal. It reached for Mary's ear, touched, and her face began to distort. The eyes melted, the mouth stretched, forming a loudspeaker. Elliot stopped the tape, trembling. He understood. The entity didn't kill anyone. It kept them, turned their voices into sound, turned them into bells. As night fell, Elliot decided to return to the bunker, not to listen, but to break the loop. He brought the VHS tape, the magnetron, and a new pair of white headphones. He plugged the tape into a small portable player, playing back the end, the part where Mary disappeared. I don't want to hear anymore, but the bell is still there. As soon as the first ringing sound came from the tape, the phone in the bunker began to vibrate. No one was calling, but it was listening to itself. Elliot put the headphones on the phone. A hissing sound like fire erupted. The room shook. The coal rings burned, swirling as if sucking everything into their center. For a moment, Elliot saw all the dead, Jamie, Mary, Robbie, standing silently in the flickering light. And then, the light went out. No one was there. The room was left with only the phone, silence, coldness, and a line of words written in charcoal newly appeared. "You heard, but you also taught it to be quiet." Elliot walked up the stairs. The apartment no longer rang, but he knew the sound was only temporary, and every door could be the next speaker. Elliot didn't return to the apartment for days. He moved in with an old friend, Grace, in Yorkshire. He tried to ignore what had happened, burying himself in work and avoiding all electronics, especially his phone. But that first night in Yorkshire at exactly 3:13 a.m., the alarm clock beside his bed went off, emitting a high-pitched screech, like someone was screaming from inside the metal. Grace heard it and ran into the room, only to find Elliot shaking, clutching his head, sweating. "He doesn't need a phone anymore," Elliot whispered. "He calls everything now." The next day, he checked the alarm. No speaker, no power. Grace swore she'd unplugged it 2 days ago. The only thing in the room making a sound was Elliot. He panicked. Not because the device rang, but because in his dream he heard his own voice, whispering in his ear, "Elliot, don't talk. You're turning into a signal." The next night he heard the sound of water dripping in the bathroom, but when he opened the door, the tap was dry. The sound continued, but it was coming from the wall. Elliot pressed his ear to the tiles and realized it was a breathing sound, a faint, rapid breath, as if someone was lying face down on the other side, listening. Elliot left Yorkshire, returned to Manchester, but not to the flat. He began to seek out people who had had similar experiences, victims connected to the building or the surrounding area. A man named Thomas, who had been an electrician on the project, recalled, "In 1991, I went down to the basement to check the wiring. I heard a phone call. No one talking, just me, but younger, laughing. After that, I couldn't stop talking to myself. I lost control of my voice." Thomas now lives in a nursing home. They have to insert earplugs every night because he talks in two voices, his own and a raspy, feminine, broken voice. Elliot shudders. He's no longer a transmitter, he's a loudspeaker, part of a living frequency. He begins to see synchronicities. Every TV he turns on is at exactly 3:13 in any program. When he turns on the faucet, the sound flows in rhythm, just like a phone ringing. Once in a taxi, the driver turns on the radio, and Elliot hears his own voice on the airwaves. "Jamie's not dead, just being held." The driver asks, "What station is that on?" Elliot doesn't answer. He gets out of the car and runs. That night he returns to the apartment, not out of curiosity, but everywhere echoed his voice. At least here he knew what was listening. The apartment was silent, but now on the walls were countless scratches, extending from the electrical outlet, the TV speaker, the water pipe. Everything looked like it had been scratched from the inside by fingernails. Elliot turned on the kitchen light and saw something on the ceiling, a piece of peeling wood. Underneath was a layer of ash, covered with fallen fingernails and small pieces of human ears. And then the phone rang. Elliot didn't answer, but this time it went to the speakerphone. A voice as soft as a breeze rang out. "We don't need you to listen anymore, Elliot. You've made enough noise." Right then, all the devices in the room, speakers, phone, tape recorder, emitted the sound of Elliot screaming at the same time. Not screaming in fear, but in protest, an invisible struggle. The room shook, the wooden floor cracked, and from those cracks a layer of charred coal, black as tar, oozed scribbles. A nearby mirror reflected, but not Elliot. It was Jamie. Sunken eyes, smoking ears. Jamie looked at Elliot and couldn't speak. But Elliot understood. "It's using me as a transmitter, and you're the next device." Elliot ran, not home, not to the police station, but to a cellar under the old train station where there was no signal, no electronic signal. He stayed there for 3 days, but even his dreams were taken over. In the dream, he stood among a pile of old phones, all dialing 313, and they rang, but no one called. He was the one who dialed. He called a number that didn't exist, and on the other end, Jamie's voice answered, "You're the server, you're not a person anymore." Elliot woke in the dark, but this time nothing rang, no signal, no knock. He wondered if he had escaped, or had become an extension of the other thing entirely, a living radio station, wandering the world, waiting for the next ring. He opened his mouth, tried Jamie's name, but no sound came out. His tongue was dry and burned. Just then a distant sound rang out, not a phone, a laugh, a child. Elliot turned. In the darkness, someone's phone was flashing. A message appeared on the screen. "Jamie just sent you a voice message." And reflexively, Elliot tapped to answer. The ring rang again. Elliot left the cellar on a misty morning, the first light he had seen in days coming from the station's advertising screens. But instead of train information, the screen showed exactly 3:13 a.m., and underneath the words slowly appeared, "Signal is transmitting." He backed away, bumping into a cold stone pillar. A couple walked by, stopped to look at him, and then whispered in unison, "He's the next source." Elliot ran. His heart was pounding, his throat was dry, and every step he took seemed to echo his own voice. A countersound, but not out of tune. He returned to Grace's house, but he didn't go inside. Instead, he hid in the shed behind the garden, smashing every device with a speaker, microphone, or connection with a hammer. Each blow was a prayer, but also a different sound coming from the cracks. "Don't break me. I'm studying you. I'm cloning." As the last recorder was smashed, a female voice rang out through the air. "Grace is no longer here, Elliot. She has transmitted." Elliot panicked. He ran into the main house, where he found Grace sitting motionless in front of the television, eyes wide open, blood streaming from her ears and nose. The television was a black screen, but the speakers were still playing the familiar sound. English, saying her name, as if comforting, as if lulling a broken soul to sleep. Elliot understood that this was no longer a warning, it was a campaign of contagion. The entity was copying human voices, transmitting them through sound, and turning each person into a frequency transmitter. He went to the mental hospital where Thomas was being treated, but this time not to ask questions, but to find the final answer. In a quiet room, he asked to hear Thomas's first recording from 1991. An old cassette tape was brought out. Elliot put on his headphones. It was a one-sided conversation. "I'm here, but why do I hear you? Behind me." Thomas, 20, was heard. But at the end of the segment, a woman's voice whispered, "The sound always comes back, Thomas. Don't turn around." Elliot took off his headphones. His eyes widened. There was a shadowy figure standing behind him in the room, reflected in the glass. No one else saw it. He decided to go back to where it had all started, the basement of the old building where the first phone had rung. But this time he went deeper, down to the bottom. The passage was narrow, covered with burnt wires and dried blood, but at the end of the hallway was an ancient wooden door, lockless but cold. He opened it. Inside was a soundproof room filled with portraits. Each had a mouth cut out, replaced by a small speaker. In the center of the room was Jamie, sitting motionless on a wooden chair, both ears plugged into audio jacks, eyes wide and lifeless. On his chest was a paper sign that read, "First Transmitter." Elliot walked over shakily. Jamie blinked. It wasn't a hallucination. Jamie was alive, but he couldn't speak. He could only listen. Beside him was a faded tape recorder. Elliot played it. The sound that came out wasn't someone else's, but Elliot's own from 10 years ago. A diary entry he'd written when he was an intern at the local radio station. The hypothesis, if a signal is repeated over and over again, it will create spatial resonance, but what if the signal has a mind? Elliot gasped. That was why it had chosen him. He had unwittingly spread the first seed. The walls of the room began to shake. The speakers on the portrait simultaneously emitted human sounds, screaming, and then went silent. And they all repeated the same phrase, "I am the signal. I do not need a body." Elliot understood that the sound could not be destroyed because it was not physical, but it could be blocked. He took the tape, inserted it into the old device, adjusted the frequency, and started playing it backwards. All the speakers began to vibrate. The screams turned to screeches, then quiet. Jamie fell. The portraits fell. Each speaker shattered. The smell of ozone was acrid. The air turned to a sticky consistency. After a while, the only sound in the room was Elliot's breathing. Jamie was alive. He held his friend, trying to wake him. Jamie opened his eyes and whispered, "It's not over, Elliot. It's just changed frequency." The room shook again. A small light in the corner flickered, not in time, not voltage. Elliot stepped forward. On the wall, in blood, someone had written, "Don't listen. Don't remember." Jamie stood up, his eyes now hollow. He muttered, mesmerized, "It won't stop, as long as there are people recording. As long as there are ears to listen to." The ringing rang again, but this time from Elliot's own heart. His heart beat irregularly. Each beat was a frequency. Each beat was a bell. Jamie whispered, "We are no longer human, Elliot. We are broadcasting." Outside the room, the electronic devices simultaneously emitted a text. Phase 2 initiated. Resetting. Bioformat. Elliot collapsed, his mouth uttering a sound, not human, a binary code, encoded into sound. And then darkness swallowed everything. The night sky was covered in thick clouds, no moon, no stars, as if the whole universe was trying to hide something. Elliot, with tired eyes, stepped out of the illusory corridor he thought he had escaped in the previous part, but the door he had just passed through disappeared behind him as if it had never existed. Before him was a white space, no walls, no floor, no sky, just an endless void where light was emitted by nameless, shapeless objects. A ding sounded behind him. Elliot turned around. An old CRT monitor, 80s style, emerged from the void. On the screen was an image of himself, but not the current him, but a different version. Elliot, with eyes as black as a hole, staring back at himself from within the screen. Welcome to the 7th data layer, Elliot. Here, information is not dead. It is replicated. The voice came from inside his head, not through his ears, a kind of transmission straight into his nervous system. Each syllable was encoded, decompressed, and transmitted as images, memories, and emotions that did not belong to him. A series of images appeared. His mother sat in the middle of a ruined room, surrounded by hundreds of ringing phones. Jamie, his missing friend from the previous part, stood in a circle of data, her body glowing like a living transmitter. A surgical table where he saw himself being cut open, but there were no organs inside, only cables and circuits. Elliot wanted to scream, but no sound came out. His emotional system was disabled like a reprogrammed program. From the left, a door of binary code emerged. 0101010101, continuously running like lifeblood. Elliot touched the door and was instantly sucked into a data vortex. In a flash, he found himself in another space, an old church, but instead of an altar, there was a live screen. Thousands of eyes were watching. Hey, Elliot, thanks for sharing your mind. They're watching. Every dream, every thought, every panic, it's live. A female voice rang out. Elliot recognized it, Grace, but she wasn't Grace anymore. Her face was blank, only glowing outlines. She walked toward him, leaving scorched footprints in the cold tiles. We call you Signal Elliot because you were the first to pick up the sound from the 13th dimension, and now they want more. A red light swept over Elliot. For a few seconds he saw himself, but millions of versions, each with a distorted memory, an Elliot who killed his mother because he thought she was a simulation. Elliot laughs maniacally as he cradles Jamie's body. Elliot cuts open his own head to find the primordial signal. He collapses. In the distance, the phone rings again, but this time it's not a ring, it's the sound of neurons firing. A voice, almost a moan, says, "We are the signals, we are broadcast, forever." A creature emerges from the livestream screen, half human, half wire, its face 1,000 USB ports and tiny camera eyes. It crawls closer to Elliot, whispering in his voice, "They don't want to watch anymore. They want to experience it. And you, Elliot, will be the script." The creature's metal hand touches his forehead. A memory immediately floods in. Elliot standing in front of a mirror, but the mirror doesn't reflect him. It only projects a black hole. In a last-ditch effort, Elliot shouted, "I'm not data. I'm a person. I don't belong here." A bright light shattered the live stream. He woke up, or so he thought. In front of him was a white medical room, modern machinery. On a chair, a woman in a white blouse typing on an electronic board. "Elliot, are you okay? You just escaped a 7-minute memory fragmentation cycle." He was bewildered. Everything just now was an illusion. But then he saw the old landline phone lying neatly on the doctor's desk. It was ringing. No ring, just vibrating. Internal call. Signal code 1313. Elliot picked up the receiver. Grace's voice rang out again. "Can you imagine, Elliot, that every piece of software has a soul, and we are just updates of a dead memory. The white walls began to melt. The medical room became a stage. On the stage, Elliot stood in the spotlight holding a microphone. The audience below applauded, all of them, thousands of eyeless Elliot clones. A sign appeared on the projection screen behind him. Live Elliot, the last man who thought he was alive. Everything spun again, and the phone rang again. This time, no one answered. Everything spun after the final bell rang. Elliot found himself falling through layers of dim light, as if sliding along a living magnetic field. He hit the cold ground, not the familiar stage or hallway, but a rotting wooden floor smelt of mold and rust. An old loft appeared before him, low-ceilinged, windows sealed with dozens of layers of opaque tape. Elliot sat up, the receiver still in his hand, but the phone cord was gone. A light tapping sound came from behind him, regular 3x3 beats, like someone tapping the wall with long fingernails. Click, click, click. Elliot turned, an old mirror, but it didn't reflect him. Instead, he saw the room behind him, and a figure standing still. Long hair hanging down, holding an old recording device. Elliot. The voice came not from his ears, but from his body. A line of text appeared below the mirror. File 13-8. Playing simulated memories. He reached out to touch the mirror. The surface was icy cold, and then the mirror shattered, but instead of glass, lines of floating codes fell down, forming a staircase. He had no choice but to step up. Upstairs was a familiar hallway, but empty. Every framed picture on the wall had been removed, replaced by small CRT screens, playing back the memories Elliot had forgotten. On each screen, him hiding under the desk as his mother screamed at the phone that wouldn't stop ringing. Jamie being sucked into the void where the well was. A man, his father, walking toward the darkness with a candle. Suddenly, one of the screens went black. A strange sound came from behind the wall. Bang. A hand broke through the wooden wall, dragging a limp body. Jamie. But his face was gone. There was only a dark void where a microphone had been embedded in his jaw. Elliot, I can't escape. I'm an appendage of the signal. Jamie twitched, then disintegrated into 1,000 numbers, flowing down the hallway. Elliot screamed, but his voice was echoed by his own distant voice like an old speaker. You sign the terms, Elliot. Every time you remember, the system restructures. He ran. The tapping, 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 now echoed from all sides. The ceiling began to crack. A pair of small legs poked out from the gap, dangling. A little girl fell right in front of him, her eyes blank, her mouth toothless, all wires. Have you forgotten me? I was in the well, a long time ago. The girl fell to her knees, looking up at him as if asking for help. But Elliot backed away, hitting a door. Behind it was a conference room, but it was empty. Just hundreds of microphones attached to empty chairs, all recording at once. A projection screen at the back of the room read, Personality Trial, Elliot Entity Evaluation. A voice boomed from the speaker system as if the entire room were a body whispering, We need to verify who the real Elliot is. A clone of Elliot stepped out, skin ashen, eyes milky white, voice distorted but even, I am Elliot, the original. The other one is a data error. The discrepancy caused the system to crackle. The room shook. The knocking sounded again, this time a head banging against the wall. Elliot looked over at himself, banging his head to remember something. Each knock brought a memory back. A man in a white lab coat implanting a chip into the back of his neck. A contract that read, Acceptance as a TV series character, no cancellation allowed. A video of Elliot signing his name in blood. He screamed, I didn't sign. I'm not a clone. I am me. When he opened his eyes, he was in front of the familiar room where his mother used to call, but this time she wasn't there. There was just an old control panel with a glowing red redial button. He pressed the button. A loud bang from behind. The room spun. The world became a recording studio, and standing in the center, his mother with a microphone attached to her neck reading a script in a mechanical voice. Broadcast 1308, Elliot variation number 26, flashback error. Destructive content activation. Elliot lunged forward but was restrained by wires sprouting from the floor, binding his limbs. His mother turned. But now her face was Elliot's. Their voices were mixed. "We are one, don't you remember? You were created from my script. I was never real." The red light turned on. A voice announced through the air. "Experiment begins. Memory rebirth. Entity no longer has viewers." Finale activated. The ceiling was torn open. Hundreds of phones fell from above, each ringing at the same time. Elliot was enveloped in the ringing, each one a shattered memory. Everything exploded in white light. Elliot opened his eyes again. In front of him was a simple living room. The morning news was on the TV. His mother was making tea. Jamie was reading. Normal, too normal. "Elliot, wake up, you fell asleep on the couch." "No." He was silent. On the table, an old telephone, and it started ringing. The TV screen turned gray. The words appeared, "Episode 9, loading." Elliot sat motionless on the sofa, his eyes fixed on the old telephone on the coffee table. The ringing continued, monotonous, but it seemed to pierce the air, sending cold waves of sound into the back of his mind. His mother was still standing over the boiling tea, but her posture was stiff, her shoulders not moving with her breathing. Jamie was still holding the book, but it had been too long since he had turned a page. He realized neither of them blinked. "Elliot, wake up. You fell asleep on the couch." "Repeat." The words rang out a second time, the same, every pause, every syllable, every pitch. Jamie chuckled without looking up and said, "Are you dreaming?" "You're always dreaming." Elliot reached out to turn the ringing off, but the phone had no button. He touched it and realized he had no feeling in his fingertips, as if his hand no longer belonged to him. A chill ran down his spine. He jumped up. The world slowed. Every movement felt heavy, like water. Elliot rushed out of the room, throwing open the large door. There was no hallway, just a wall with a bold line of text. Episode 9, now live. He turned. The room was gone. It was a television studio where a host spoke directly into the camera. "And now, viewers, watch the fall of personality 26, the corrupted Elliot." In front of him was a row of simulated spectators. Their faces were blurred, but they were all staring at him, unblinking. One of them laughed, but the sound came from speakers in the ceiling. Elliot backed away, but beneath his feet the ground began to crack. He fell into an empty space, ash gray, surrounded by screens showing scenes Elliot had experienced. But each scene had a slight difference. His mother was someone else. Jamie was someone else. The room was tilted at an angle. The clock was turned backwards. "You never existed." Jamie's voice, now deeper, echoed from all sides. One of the screens showed Elliot signing his name, blood dripping from the pen onto the paper. But Elliot knew he had never signed. He screamed, "I am real. I am not a program." A trap door opened beneath him. Elliot fell to a deeper level, this time into a library. But all the books were white, with only one line on the cover, memories awaiting rewriting. A figure stepped out from behind the bookshelf. It was him, but younger, with longer hair, bloodshot eyes. The other self screamed, "You are me after forgetting. I am me before being rewritten." They crashed into each other. Elliot felt as if his head were about to explode, memories clashing, conflicting. Was his mother dead, or was she? Was Jamie his best friend, or a replacement? A pounding headache sent him crashing to the floor, but instead of hitting the ground, he crashed through it, into a long white-tiled hallway, windowless, unlit. A single fluorescent light flickered in and out. On the wall were old photographs, a picture of Elliot as a child, but his face was covered by a piece of paper that read, Broken. Remove. He walked toward an old metal door, and behind it came the familiar sounds. A typewriter, gasps, and a distant ringing phone. Inside, Elliot found a woman resembling his mother, but with a face that was nothing more than a block of smooth skin. She sat at the typewriter, typing away. Elliot wakes up. Elliot sees the phone. Elliot is terrified. Elliot can't get away. He shouted, "Stop! I'm not your script!" She looked up, one eye opening between her cheeks, and whispered, "Then stop reading." All was lost. Elliot woke up, this time in an abandoned hospital. The beds were askew, the lights were flickering. On the wall were a series of neuronal maps and a brain scan labeled 26E. A door opened slightly. He stepped in and saw himself, but a faceless version standing with his back turned, holding a phone receiver. The clone turned around, revealing his face, but it was all numbers. A speaker mounted on his forehead emitted a system voice. "The original has been fragmented. The final stage is underway." Elliot screamed, shattering the glass, rushing down the hallway. Other clones suddenly appeared, dragging IV lines, screaming inhuman sounds. One of them grabbed his hand and said, "If you turn off the show, all the memories will disappear, but if you continue, we will never be real." He ran. Layers of walls collapsed. Fragments of memories were like broken paintings. Mom smiled. Jamie handed over the phone. The host spoke into the camera. "This is my favorite part, the part where the puppet starts to know it's being pulled." Elliot fell into a circular room. In the middle was the phone, the first one. On the electronic screen was the message, "Do you want to end the show?" Behind him, Jamie appeared, but her face was now blank like a white mask. He repeated, "It's not the end. Just one more part. One more part." Elliot touched the phone. Everything stopped. A female voice said, "Episode 10, Recovery, Loading." Before Elliot's eyes, all the lights went out, leaving only a flashing dot on the screen. You sure?" He nodded slightly, and the world was once again rewritten. The light went out like a strangled breath. Elliot stood in darkness, a darkness that wasn't just a lack of light, but a complete void, where even sound was sucked into the invisible space. Then, the buzzing began. In the distance, a dot of light flickered, quivering like a candle in the wind. It grew larger and became an ancient computer screen, displaying a flashing message, "Reloading program." YN. Elliot stood frozen. Beside the screen, a mechanical keyboard had appeared from somewhere, covered in dust as if it hadn't been touched in decades. But as Elliot moved closer, the dust rose like a shattered memory, revealing the still-lit keys. He started to type N, but his fingers froze. 1,000 voices screamed in his head, distant screams like the echoes of souls trapped in the code. "If you turn it off, you'll have nothing. If you leave it on, it's all fake." But what about the third option? A memory flashed through his mind, his mother smiling, handing him a slice of burnt toast. Jamie laughing as they played a video game. But Elliot knew now it was all a simulation. None of his memories belonged to him. No one had ever really existed beside him, except himself. Suddenly there was a sound behind him, a buzzing sound, then a knock. The metal door opened and no one was there. Only a shadow, tall, faceless, slowly crept in. But instead of attacking, it handed Elliot a small box. On the lid was written, "Deactivation code for those who understand." Inside was a piece of paper, 26E, rewrite, decay, greater than reset, greater than fork. The code hit Elliot's subconscious like a biological code. He understood, not to shut down the program, not to keep it running, but decline, create a separate branch away from the original structure. He entered the code. Light exploded. Thousands of commands ran along the walls, to the ceiling, to his feet. A deafening sound like shattering glass echoed in his mind. Elliot opened his eyes. He was lying in bed. but not in his house. Instead, he was in a plain white room with no pictures, no books, just a single camera aimed at his forehead, and a person standing beside him, faceless but wearing a lab coat. "Congratulations, 26E. You are the first entity to break out of the loop." "Out," Elliot repeated, his voice hoarse. "No one has ever cracked the code, but you chose to rewrite yourself." The man opened a drawer and handed Elliot a file. The cover read, "Entity 26E, Voluntary Escape from Simulated Reality." Inside was Elliot's entire false past. Photos, conversations, memory insertion scripts, emotional fragmentation, and most importantly, a report on his emotional development, reaching level 7, self-awareness. Elliot flipped through the pages, his eyes lingering on images of himself laughing, crying, screaming, all programmed expressions. But when he saw a close-up of his face, his eyes blank, he felt a chill run down his spine. Suddenly, the lights in the room went out. Every device hummed. A red line appeared on the wall. "Error. Entity is creating new memories out of control." A crackling sound rang out, and then footsteps began to echo from the hallway outside. Elliot turned. It wasn't just one person. A series of shadows were approaching, each one shaped like him but carrying a different flaw: hollow eyes, extra fingers, transparent skin. "We are failures." One of the entities spoke, a hoarse voice, flickering like static. "You were the first to be free, but I want to follow you." Elliot backed away, hitting the wall, only to find that the wall behind him was fading, transforming into a screen displaying millions of memories being recorded in real time. His hands were shaking, but then he looked straight into the camera, speaking each word clearly. "I am no longer 26E, I am Elliot, and I do not rewrite memories, I rewrite existence." He pressed the button. Everything exploded. In T Control Room Monitoring Center 26. Panic. Screens flashed, alarms filled the room. A technician shouted, "Signal branched!" Unable to trace the source. A female voice from the command chair, cold but urgent. "No need to recall. Follow. Elliot will lead us to the generation beyond level 8. Elliot opened his eyes. This time it was a wasteland. No screens, no cables, just the dark sky and the smell of damp earth. He walked among the slowly emerging figures, real people, with eyes, breathing in fear. In his pocket was a small tape recorder playing the words, "Darkness Tells, Record 0001. Behind him, a public phone vibrated. It rang. Elliot didn't turn around. Episode 10, End or Beginning. You're still watching Darkness Tells. Are you ready for the next show? You've just finished the final episode of Darkness Tells, The Phone That Rang in the Dark, a 10-chapter journey of warped memories, programmed identities, and the choice between living or surviving as a controlled software. And if you thought it was all over, you were wrong. Elliot may have escaped, but who's rewriting you? Who's editing your memories now? Do you really remember what happened yesterday? Are you sure that the phone ringing in the middle of the night was just an echo of a dream? We don't tell stories for your entertainment. We tell them to make you think, to make you question the things that seem so familiar. Your room, the faces of your loved ones, even you, the person sitting in front of that screen. If Elliot is a simulation, then who are you? Lessons learned. In a world where the lines between reality and fantasy are increasingly blurred, you need more than just a powerful computer or a stable internet connection. You need awareness, you need to be skeptical, and most importantly, you need to have the courage to break out of the loop. Like Elliot, we may not be able to control where we were born, but we can choose our way out if we dare to ask questions, if we dare to press our own fork button. Because in every system there is always a loophole, and sometimes that loophole is you. If you find this story makes your heart beat faster, makes you take a second look at the screen, makes you jump when your phone rings at 3 a.m., like the video, subscribe to Darkness Tells, and share it with a friend, someone you suspect, is also living in a simulation. And if you want to open the next door, where darkness is no longer a metaphor, but a code, turn on your notifications, because we're coming back. And when we do, reality will no longer be as you know it. We are Darkness Tells. Listen closely, because whispers are beginning to enter your ears from the other side of the screen.